Hi there, hope you are doing fine. This is Mr. Philip Koma, the excellent biology tutor. We're looking at respiration, and this is part 2. Without wasting much of your time, let us begin. What are the objectives for this tutorial video? What are we going to learn today? We're going to look at breathing and gaseous exchange. We're going to look at breathing in humans. We're going to look at gaseous exchange in humans. And we're also going to look at the effects of smoking on the respiratory system. Alright, without wasting much of your time, tiambe. Breathing and gaseous exchange. Right now, I want you to breathe in, then breathe out. What you've done is what has enabled you to be alive up to today, because you're breathing in and breathing out. Okay, that's very important. So today we're going to learn more about breathing and gaseous exchange, because these are the processes that are very important for our survival. Let's define breathing. Breathing in terrestrial animals such as human beings is defined as the movement of air into and out of the lungs. So for animals such as human beings, animals that live on land are terrestrial animals. So when you hear this term terrestrial animals, don't get confused. Terrestrial animals in Chani, I've told you, these are animals that simply live on land. Talking of the lions, elephant, cheetah, all those, they live on land, therefore they are terrestrial animals. So for such animals, breathing is defined as the movement of air into and out of the lungs. Okay? Alright. And then in aquatic animals such as fish, breathing is the movement of water into and out of the gill chamber. So for aquatic animals, these are animals that live in water. So for such animals, breathing is the movement of what? Water into and out of the gill chamber. Alright. Another term used to refer to breathing is ventilation. So ventilation is simply another word for breathing. If they ask you in an exam, define ventilation, don't get confused. They are simply asking you to define breathing. Okay, so ventilation, breathing, same na chimosmos. Alright, so the other term for breathing is ventilation. Alright, breathing involves two stages known as inspiration, which is also known as inhalation, and expiration, also known as exhalation. These are the two stages of breathing. You breathe in and you breathe out. So breathing in is inspiration or inhalation, and then breathing out is expiration or exhalation. Remember, I asked you to breathe in and to breathe out, right? Those are the two stages of breathing. So when you breathe in and out, that's one breath. Alright? Okay, let's look at gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange is the diffusion of oxygen into the blood and carbon dioxide out of the blood across a gaseous exchange surface. So gaseous exchange, the same term defines itself. Gases are exchanging, gaseous exchange. So there is an exchange of gases that occurs across a gaseous exchange surface. What are these gases? Oxygen and carbon dioxide. So we're saying that oxygen will diffuse into the blood while carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the blood. So there's an exchange. Oxygen is going to diffuse into the blood, carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the blood. There's an exchange, okay? And this exchange occurs across a gaseous exchange surface. And this gaseous exchange surface is known as the alveoli in human beings and gills in a fish. In humans, the gaseous exchange surfaces are the alveoli found in the lungs, while the gaseous exchange surfaces in fish are the gills. Are you following? Alright. Let us move on. Alright, now we've defined breathing and we've also defined gaseous exchange. Excuse me. Now let's look at the characteristics of the alveoli, which is the gaseous exchange surface in humans. What are the characteristics? In short, what are the features? The first one is the alveoli. So alveoli is for plural. If you're talking about more than one, ngati mkamba pali more than kamozi, that's what alveoli. But alveolus is mkamba kamozi. So if you're talking about one air sac, which is also known as the alveoli or alveolus, if you're talking about one, it is alveolus. If you're talking about two or three, alveoli. Okay, yeah. So what are the characteristics of the alveoli? The first one is large surface area. Let me just get my pointer. Large surface area to maximize the exchange of gases. So large surface area to maximize the exchange of gases. When they are talking about large surface area, what are they talking about? So if we have this surface and we've got this other surface, you will agree with me that this has got a large surface area compared to this one, right? This has got a large surface area. So the alveoli has got a large surface area. And this large surface area, it will maximize the exchange of these gases. What are the gases? Carbon dioxide and the oxygen. Alright, we are learning, we're learning. Now, let's look at another characteristic. Moist surface, because gases need to dissolve before they can diffuse across the surface. Moist surface because gases need to dissolve before they can diffuse across the surface. So the surface is moist. We all know moisture, isn't it? So the surface of this alveoli is moist, and that helps to dissolve these gases before they can diffuse across. Alright, let's move on to another characteristic. Thin surface to minimize the distance of diffusion so that there is faster diffusion. So thin surface to minimize the distance of diffusion so that there is faster diffusion. By thin surface, this is what they mean. So let's say this is a surface. Okay, this is a surface, then there's another surface. So between the two surfaces, this has got thick walls while this has got thin walls. So this distance is minimized to maximize, okay, to maximize the process of diffusion, because it will take less time for gases to diffuse from this point coming to this point, because the distance ni kangono chaka. Okay, so the surface, the walls are thin. Okay, thin surface to minimize the distance of diffusion. Okay, sorry, to minimize the distance of diffusion so that diffusion is faster. All right, don't lose me there. So the walls are thin to simply minimize the distance so that they can be faster diffusion. Because if you look at this wall, it is thick, therefore it will take a bit of time for gases to move from this point to this point. So this is the characteristic of the alveoli and not this. The walls of the alveoli are thin to minimize the distance of diffusion. Alright. Let's look at another characteristic. Close association with a transport system to transport the gases to and from the gaseous exchange surface, thereby maintaining a constant diffusion gradient for the gases. So, close association with a transport system. When you hear this term transport system, what should come to your mind are blood vessels, the heart, blood. Those are the things that form up the transport system. So the alveoli is closely associated with the transport system to simply transport the gases that are diffusing across this gaseous exchange surface, to transport the gases to and from the gaseous exchange surface, thereby maintaining a constant diffusion gradient for the gases. So this alveoli is closely associated with a transport system. We're going to see that later on. Alright, well ventilated to maintain a constant diffusion gradient. we talked about ventilation, right? Meaning it receives enough air. Okay, every house has got my air vents. Why? Because there is need for air to go into the house, isn't it? So even the alveoli, they are well ventilated. So there is that they receive enough air, okay, so that they can maintain a constant diffusion gradient. Now let's look at breathing in human beings. We already know that breathing is taking in air and then taking out air. That's one breath, right? We already know that. And we also know that in human beings, gaseous exchange occurs across the alveoli, isn't it? Now, let's look at a diagram. This is the system that human beings have, okay? So we've got, let me get my pointer. We've got the nasal cavity, which is mumpuno. We've got the buccal cavity, which is the mouth. Excuse me. So the other term for mouth is buccal cavity. The other term for nose is nasal cavity. You should be using these terms. Let me eat. Let me put some food in my buccal cavity. Nanka buccal cavity ni chani. Because you learned from the excellent tutor, you tell them, nimukamwa, don't be flummoxed. Nimukamwa. So nasal cavity, we've got the buccal cavity. So when you're breathing in, it's either you're going to breathe in through the nose or through the mouth. But it is advisable to breathe through the nose. But you breathe in through the mouth. Okay? So we've got the nasal cavity, which is the and also the buccal cavity. Okay? What else do we have? We've got the epiglottis. And then we've got the larynx. Okay, we've got the larynx. What else do we have? We've got the trachea. As you can see, this is like a tube, trachea, which leads to the bronchus. Okay, bronchus. Okay, these are the two bronchus. And then we've got the bronchiole. So before I go any further, my own trachea, it will divide into the bronchus. Bronchus inangwenda huku, inangwenda huku. And then the bronchus will divide into bronchioles. Matuona tuma tube tuma bronchioles. Then after the bronchioles, we've got the alveolus. Mwaona manje ngati kama pali akamozi, it is alveolus. But if we're talking about more than one, alveoli, okay? And then we also have the ribs and the ribs. These are ribs. And then we've got the intercostal muscles. Okay, these are intercostal muscles. And then we've got the pleural cavity. Then we've got the pleural membrane. So if you can, let me just try to zoom in. So we've got the pleural cavity. Pleural cavity. It's pointing pakati, so this kind of thing. It is a pleural cavity. And then we've got the pleural membrane. These two, they are pleural membranes. And then we've got the lungs. And finally, we've got the diaphragm. So this is the system of the respiratory system in human beings. This is the respiratory system. Alright? Now, we're still looking at breathing in human beings. Breathing involves two things. You breathe in and you breathe out. You breathe in and you breathe out. We said breathing in is known as what? Inspiration or inhalation. Breathing out is known as what? Expiration or exhalation. So when you breathe in, there are changes that will occur to the diaphragm, lungs. There are changes that are going to happen, and that's what we're learning now. So during inspiration, what happens to the diaphragm? So when you're breathing in, the diaphragm, first of all, is a muscle. It is a muscle. So when you breathe in, what will happen to the diaphragm? It will contract and move downwards. In short, it will flatten. Okay? It will flatten. So when you breathe in, diaphragm contracts and moves downwards. Therefore, it will do what? It will flatten. It flattens. But when you're breathing out, the diaphragm is going to relax and it will move upwards and become dome shaped. So in short, this is what they're talking about. When you breathe in, the diaphragm will contract and it will move downwards, therefore it will flatten like that. Then when you breathe out, it will relax and move upwards, so it will look like that. This is what happens. Ngati diaphragm yasoba ndiye mene wakamba hapo ili hapa. Mwaona ili hapa. So when you breathe in, it will be like that. When you breathe out, it will be like that. That's what happens to the diaphragm. Alright. So what of when so I've explained what will happen to the diaphragm when you breathe in and when you breathe out, right? So when you breathe in, the muscle will contract. A diaphragm is a muscle, so it is going to contract and it will move downwards. Okay, when you breathe out, it will relax and it will move upwards. That's what happens to the diaphragm. Nothing much to think about there. And then the external intercostal muscles, they will contract when you're breathing in. These are muscles that control the rib cage, the expansion of the rib cage. Okay, these are the muscles, the external intercostal muscles and the internal intercostal muscles. These are the ones that are in charge of expanding the rib cage. Okay, right. So when you're breathing in, the external intercostal muscles are going to contract. All right. When you're breathing out, the external intercostal muscles are going to relax. So as you are breathing in, when the external intercostal muscles contract, the internal intercostal muscles are going to do what? To relax. Okay? They work, they are pairs. So they work opposite. Ikashita contract, inangwashita relax. Are you following? So when you're breathing in, the external intercostal muscles are going to contract. When you're breathing out, the external intercostal muscles are going to relax. When you're breathing in, the internal intercostal muscles are going to relax. When you're breathing out, the internal intercostal muscles are going to contract. That's what happens. So opposite. As you're breathing in, when the external intercostal muscles contract, the internal intercostal muscles are going to relax. When you're breathing out, the external intercostal muscles are going to relax, while the internal intercostal muscles are going to contract. Opposite. Alright? Opposite. Alright. Rib cage. When you're breathing in during inspiration, the rib cage moves upwards and outwards. And this is because of the external intercostal muscles and the internal intercostal muscles. So when you're breathing in, the rib cage will move upwards and outwards. Are you following? Yes. When you're breathing out, which is expiration, the rib cage will move downwards and inwards as you are breathing out. Alright. And then another thing that will happen is the volume of lungs. When you're breathing in, the volume of lungs is going to do what? To increase, meaning there will be more air inside. Now there's something that I want you to understand, but before I explain, let me first continue. So when you breathe in, the volume of lungs is going to do what? To increase. But when you're breathing out, the volume of air of the lungs will do what? It will decrease. That's what happens. So when you breathe in, the volume will increase. When you breathe out, the volume decreases. When you breathe in, the pressure in lungs decreases lower than the atmospheric pressure. When you breathe out, the pressure in lungs increases higher than the atmospheric pressure. Let's pause there for a minute. So let me just erase. Alright. So we're talking about pressure now. There is what we call atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is pressure coming from the outside. Okay? So inside your lungs, there is pressure. It is this pressure that pushes the air out of the lungs. Outside there is atmospheric pressure. It is that pressure which pushes air in the lungs. Are you following? So panja apa pali pressure, atmospheric pressure. When you're breathing in, that atmospheric pressure will push the air going into the lungs. Muma lungs namo muli pressure. That pressure ndiye amene mapushinga mpepo kuchoka. Are you following? When you're breathing out, it is the pressure from the lungs that pushes the air out. And then when you're breathing in, it is the atmospheric pressure that pushes the air in. So when you're breathing in, what does that mean? It means the pressure outside is more than the pressure inside. It simply means the atmospheric pressure is more than the pressure in the lungs. So when you're breathing in, pressure in the lungs decreases. It becomes lower than the atmospheric pressure because the pressure from the outside is more than, which is causing the air to move inside. But when you're breathing out, the opposite occurs. The pressure in the lungs increases more than the pressure outside, which enables the air to come out of the lungs. Simple, okay? So pressure in lungs decreases lower than atmospheric pressure. This is when you are breathing in. But when you're breathing out, pressure in lungs increases higher than the atmospheric pressure. Simple, right? Yes. And then what is the airflow? When you're breathing in, air moves into the lungs. When you're breathing out, air moves out of the lungs. Yeah? Alright. Now let's look at some terms associated with breathing in humans. What are the terms that we need to know that are associated to breathing in humans? The first term is breathing rate. What is breathing rate? So this refers to the number of breaths taken by an individual per minute. Breaths. A breath is breathing in and out. When you breathe in and out, that's one breath. So the number of breaths taken by an individual per minute, that's breathing rate. Alright? The normal breathing rate of an adult human being at rest is about 18 times. So when you're at rest, when you're resting, you should breathe in and out 18 times per minute. Alright? However, this can be altered by factors such as sleeping, illness, fever, emotional excitement, and physical exercises. So this breathing rate, it is not a permanent figure. It's not a permanent number of times, but it can change depending on different factors such as the ones that have been mentioned here. When you're excited, your breathing rate will change. When you're exercising, your breathing rate will change. So sleeping lowers the breathing rate, while other factors mentioned increases it. So illness, it will increase the breathing rate, meaning it will be more than 18. When you're emotionally excited, the breathing rate will change to be more than 18. When you're exercising, the breathing rate will change to be more than 18. But when you're sleeping, it will be lower than 18. Are you following? So 18 is the normal breathing rate of an adult human being. Okay? Another term that we need to know is tidal volume, also known as tidal air. So what is this? Tidal volume, it is the volume of air breathed in or out in one breath when resting. So as you are resting, Pacha, the volume of air that you breathe in or out is known as tidal volume. The tidal volume in human beings is about 0.5 decimeter cubed or 500 centimeter cubed. Okay. Residue volume. This is the volume of air that never comes out of the lungs after forced expiration. It keeps the lungs from collapsing. Okay. It has a value of about 1.5 decimeter cubed. So residue air in the mpepo machoka mu lungs. When you breathe out forcefully, ungopema out forcefully, there will be that air that won't come out of your lungs. That volume of air that won't come out of your lungs is referred to as residue volume. And it is important because it keeps the lungs from collapsing. The volume of that air is 1.5 decimeter cubed. Alright. Vital capacity. So vital capacity, this is the maximum volume of air breathed out after forced inspiration. This is the maximum volume of air breathed out after forced inspiration. So when you breathe in forcefully, the volume of air that you breathe out after forced inspiration is known as vital capacity. The vital capacity in humans is about 3.5 decimeter cubed, or 3,500 cubic centimeters. Aya please ayama values etikamba yaswateni yasungeni mu mutu yasungeni yangaleche mu mutu. The vital capacity can be measured using an instrument called the spirometer, in the instrument which can be used to measure vital capacity. When using a spirometer, let me even bring it here. When using a spirometer, a person must first completely fill the lungs with air and then breathe out through a tube connected to a spirometer as shown in the following diagram until normal air can be exhaled. The vital capacity is equal to the volume of water displaced. So my own, this is an individual. As I pay my first forced inspiration, they'll fill their lungs with air. And then as they are breathing out, they'll breathe through this tube. Now, before this person started breathing in, the level of water wasn't at this point. Maybe it was here. And then tube, then it started increasing up to this point. So if you're measuring, figure number that's the volume of air that you've breathed out. Are you following? That's how they measure. So this is how they measure the vital capacity, using this instrument known as the what? Spirometer. Yeah. Alright. Now let's look at composition of inspired and expired air. So this is a graph, or this is a table that you should know. There was a question in paper 1 which was asking about expired air. I remember I saw a question which was asking the content of oxygen in expired air. So please pause the video, look at it, look at this table, and you can play the video again. So what we have here, these are gases. These gases, they are found in air, the air that we breathe in. Okay, so inspired air, meaning the air that you breathe in; expired air, the air that you breathe out. So inspired air consists of 21% of oxygen, 0.03% of carbon dioxide, 78% of nitrogen, and then water vapor is variable. Okay, and then other gases, they are traces, meaning they are not they are just traces. No, they're just traces. Yeah, but I want you to pay attention to these three: oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen. So when you're breathing in, the percentage or the content of oxygen is about 21%, carbon dioxide 0.03%, nitrogen 78%. When you're breathing out, the content of that air consists of the content of oxygen in that air is 16%, then carbon dioxide 4%, nitrogen 78%. Okay, all right. So please tuma numbers tutomene tuli apa tusungeni. I saw a question in paper 1. Now let's look at gaseous exchange in humans. In humans, gaseous exchange is the diffusion of oxygen from the lungs into the blood and carbon dioxide from the blood into the lungs across the walls of the alveoli. The following diagram illustrates gaseous exchange in humans. Mwayaonaka aka ndiye ka alveoli or alveolus ka air sac kamozi aka. So in human beings, this is where gaseous exchange occurs. Remember, we looked at the characteristics and we said that the alveolus has got close association with the transport system, right? So this is a transport system. We've got a blood capillary and blood is flowing. These are red blood cells. Red blood cells contain a pigment known as hemoglobin. This hemoglobin attracts oxygen. Okay, so oxygen ingena, carbon dioxide ichoka. Upper oxygen is actually diffused, it will go into the blood, carbon dioxide will come out of the blood. oxygen to be attracted by the hemoglobin in red blood cells, and then it will combine with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Then as blood is going this side, it is now oxygenated because it has collected the oxygen at this point. So pale blood, it does not contain oxygen, therefore it is deoxygenated. As it is coming, as it is moving, once it passes through the lungs, the oxygen will diffuse into the blood, carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the blood. As oxygen is going this side, it is now oxygenated. Okay, so this is what happens really. This is what happens. This is gaseous exchange. Oxygen ingena, carbon dioxide ichoka. Effects of smoking on the respiratory system. Cigarette smoke contains 3 major toxic substances, namely nicotine, tar, and carbon monoxide. Tar is responsible for causing respiratory diseases such as bronchitis, emphysema, and lung cancer. Let me give you an assignment. Research what is bronchitis, what is emphysema, and what is lung cancer. These are important for you to know because under essay they can bring such questions. Alright, we are done. This was an interesting video. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial video. We are yet to look at part 3. This is just part 2. This has been Mr. Philip Kauma, the excellent biology tutor. Stay blessed.